The princess alien caught the human, breaking the siege. What she did will surprise you. The fortress walls groaned under the strain of another impact. Stone cracked. Dust rained from the ceiling like falling stars. Somewhere beyond the battlements, the roar of siege engines shook the night. I sat upon a throne that no longer felt like mine, my claws digging into the carved arms, my heart hammering in a rhythm that betrayed my fear. I was the princess of this house, the last heir of my line, yet the echo of war outside drowned out every title, every dream, every hope. For 7 cycles, the enemy had surrounded us. For 7 cycles, my soldiers had fought and died. And now, the larders were empty, the wells poisoned, the banners tattered. My people whispered that surrender was better than starvation. But surrender meant chains. And I would rather burn than bow. I rose from the throne and strode through the hall, the sound of my robes brushing stone the only music in that tomb of silence. Servants bowed low, though their eyes were hollow. The air stank of smoke and despair. Whispers followed me. Of something hidden in the dungeons below. A creature caught during the early battles, dragged in chains from the outer fields. They said it was a human. I had heard of them, of course. All my people had. Beasts from a backwater world, feral yet strangely dangerous. They were said to be impossible to tame, even in shackles. Some believed they were nothing but stories, curses dressed in flesh. But the whispers said this one still lived. And though the torturers had tried every cruelty, the human would not bow, would not break, would not beg. I should have dismissed it as nonsense. Yet something inside me stirred, not hope, but something sharper. Desperation. The walls shook again. The fortress groaned as if it shared my exhaustion. I closed my eyes and made my choice. I would see this human for myself. The dungeons lay deep, where the air was damp and the walls wept with cold. Torches flickered weakly in their brackets, throwing shadows that writhed across the stones. The guards stood aside as I passed, their faces pale, their eyes uncertain. None wished to linger near the cell. When I reached the last door, the stench of blood and iron struck me. Chains rattled softly within. And then I saw him. He was bound against the wall, arms stretched, wrists torn raw where the cuffs bit into his flesh. His body was bruised, scarred, lean with hunger. Yet his eyes burned. Not with madness. Not with fear. But with a fire that made my breath catch in my throat. He looked at me, and for the first time in all these cycles of war, I felt as though I were the one trapped. I should have spoken as a princess. Should have declared my power, my name, my cause. Instead, the words that slipped from me were a whisper, soft as ash. You are the human. His mouth twisted into something that was not quite a smile. His voice was hoarse, yet steady, each word striking like a drumbeat. Not a human, princess. The human. The chains rattled as he shifted, testing his bonds. His eyes never left mine. And in that moment, as the siege thundered above us, I felt the first crack in the walls of my own certainty. This was no beast. This was no broken captive. This was something else entirely. The silence between us pressed heavier than the stone above. The human's words lingered in the air, like embers refusing to fade. Not a human, the human. I drew closer, though every instinct told me to keep my distance. His chains clinked as he shifted, his gaze never faltering. Even weakened, even bound, there was something in him that unsettled me more than the siege engines battering at my walls. You are my prisoner, I said at last, forcing steel into my voice. Your fate lies in my hands. His lips curved into that strange half-smile again. Then your hands must be very small, princess, because I don't feel them closing around me. The word stung, though I did not understand why. No alien had ever spoken to me without reverence or fear. This man, this human, looked at me as though I were nothing more than another obstacle. I narrowed my eyes. Do you not fear death? He laughed, low and rough, as if the sound itself carried defiance. I've met death 100 times, and every time he walked away, the one bleeding was the other man. A chill ran through me. I had thought him broken. Instead, I saw fire. A fire that could not be chained. I leaned closer, testing him, my voice soft and mocking. Don't kill me, human. I'll warm your bed. The words left me like venom, part jest, part insult, part temptation. I wanted to see him falter. To see fear, or hunger, or anything that made him less than the myth. But his eyes hardened, and his voice came back like a blade. If you mean to offer yourself, princess, don't do it with lies. My breath caught. No one spoke to me this way. No one dared. I turned away, hiding the tremor in my chest. You are nothing but one man. One weapon. You cannot break the siege that binds us. His chains clattered as he leaned forward, his voice cutting through the cold. One man can break anything, princess. If his will is stronger than the walls around him. I froze. The words rang in me, shaking something I had buried beneath duty and despair. For the first time since the siege began, I felt the faintest spark of possibility. Slowly, I faced him again. My people were starving. My fortress was dying. Pride would not save us. Perhaps this creature could. I forced the words out, heavy as stone. If I release you. If I free you from these chains, will you fight for me? The human stilled. His eyes narrowed, studying me as if weighing my soul. Then he leaned back, and his voice dropped into something dangerous, something final. I'll fight for you, princess. I'll break your siege. I'll tear your enemies apart. His smile sharpened, and the chains rattled like laughter. But if I fight for you, you will marry me. The world tilted. My heart pounded. I had expected demands for food, for gold, for freedom. But this was something else entirely. I stared at him, unable to speak. He only waited, calm as stone, eyes burning like fire. And for the first time, I wondered if I had walked into a prison, and set myself inside. The words clung to the air like a curse. Marry him. I felt my throat tighten, my pulse hammering loud enough that I thought he might hear it. Never had such audacity been spoken in my presence. Not by nobles, not by generals, not even by the enemy who sought my death. And yet here he sat, chained, broken in flesh but unbroken in spirit, and he demanded not freedom, but me. My lips curled, half in outrage, half in disbelief. You dare. You, a prisoner, a savage, speak of claiming a princess. His gaze did not waver. You asked what price I wanted. That is my answer. You should beg for your life, I hissed, stepping closer, not presume to bind mine. At last, he smiled, and I realized it was not arrogance, not madness, only certainty. I don't beg, princess. I never have. I never will. The torches flickered. The stone seemed to lean closer, listening. For a moment, I could not find words. His chains clattered softly as he shifted, leaning forward until the firelight cut sharp lines across his battered face. You want your fortress saved? Your people spared? Then you need me. His voice was steady, relentless, like the beating of war drums. And if I fight for you, princess, you will belong to me. Not as spoiled. Not as a prize. As my wife. I staggered back a step, my chest tight. No one had ever spoken to me this way. Every suitor in the empire had knelt in fear, in reverence, in practiced poetry. But this man, this human, spoke as though destiny were a thing he could carve with his bare hands. I should have called the guards. I should have ordered him executed. But something in me whispered that killing him would be no victory. It would be fear. I thought of my people, gaunt and hollow-eyed. Of the walls crumbling under endless assault. Of the shame of surrender. My pride screamed against the thought, but desperation gnawed louder. If I grant this, my voice trembled in ways I despised. If I give you what you demand, how do I know you will not simply take and leave us to ruin? His eyes softened then, though the fire within them did not fade. Because, princess, I don't break oaths. Not to those I choose. Those words struck deeper than I expected. In a world where every promise was stained with deceit, here was a creature of chains who dared to speak of honor. I closed my eyes. The walls shuddered again above us, the sound of another strike echoing through the stone. Dust fell on my shoulders like snow. I opened them, and I gave my answer. You will fight for me. You will save this fortress. And if you do, my throat ached as the words tore free. I will marry you. His smile widened, not cruel, not mocking, but fierce, triumphant, as though he had already won. The chains groaned as he straightened, and his voice rolled through the dungeon like thunder. Then let me loose, princess. And watch what a human can do. The keys were cold in my hand. For a long moment, I hesitated before the chains, the human watching me with steady, unblinking eyes. Every instinct screamed that what I was about to do was madness. But what choice did I have? The enemy was at our gates, their banners blotting out the horizon. My soldiers starved. My walls bled stone. Hope had fled long ago. And yet, here, in the darkness, it burned still. In him. The lock clicked. The first shackle fell away, then the second. His arms dropped, muscles stiff, but he did not groan or falter. He simply rolled his shoulders, as though shrugging off years instead of chains. You're free, I whispered, though I was no longer sure if the words were a promise or a warning. He flexed his hands, bloodied wrists raw, and for a moment just stood there, breathing. Then he looked at me, not as a prisoner looks at his jailer, but as a storm looks at the shore. Good, he said simply. When the last chain struck the floor, the air itself seemed to change. He was no longer caged, no longer bound. He was something else now. Something whole. And then, like lightning, he moved. The guards barely had time to react. He tore the spear from one's grip, slammed the man into the wall, and with a crack of bone, silence followed. The second lunged, too slow. The human's fist shattered his jaw, dropping him like a doll. I froze, heart hammering. He was not trained like our warriors, not polished in form or art. He fought like the wild, each strike brutal, each motion born of survival. And yet, it was effective. Terrifyingly so. Blood stained the stones. He stood in the center of it, chest heaving, eyes burning. When he turned toward me, for a heartbeat, I thought he might finish what he started. But instead, he knelt. One knee upon the ground, his head bowed low. My princess, he said, voice low but steady. Show me where to fight. The words chilled me more than slaughter. Not because they were gentle, but because I knew he meant them. I led him from the dungeon, the fortress trembling with every distant strike of the siege engines. Soldiers turned as we emerged into the torchlight. Their eyes widened, hands reaching for blades, but I raised mine. This one fights for us, I declared, my voice ringing against the stone. Stand aside. Some obeyed out of fear. Some are in confusion. But none challenged me, for desperation had already hollowed them. At the gates, the enemy's war drums thundered. Shadows moved beyond the firelight, preparing their final push. The air stank of smoke and death. The human stepped forward, bare-chested, bleeding, unarmed save for the spear he'd stolen. He looked at the field of thousands, then back at me. And he grinned. They think the siege has broken you, he said softly. Let's show them what happens when you give a human something worth fighting for. The gates groaned as they opened. The knights screamed as the enemy charged. And then he was among them. He did not fight like my people. He did not form lines or wait for orders. He was a whirlwind, ducking, striking, ripping weapons from hands, turning them back with merciless precision. He fought with rage and cunning, using every weakness, every hesitation. The enemy faltered, stumbling back at the sight of one man carving through their ranks. They had come for easy slaughter. Instead, they found a predator unleashed. From the walls above, my soldiers shouted. For the first time in cycles, I heard not despair but awe. I stood frozen, my chest tight, watching the impossible unfold. And in that chaos, one thought clawed its way into my mind and would not leave. This was the price I had agreed to. This storm of blood, this fire of will, it was mine now. And I was his. The battlefield roared like a furnace. Smoke and blood thickened the air, and through it all, I saw him, the human, moving like a blade cutting through fabric. Every strike was final. Every motion is brutal and deliberate. He tore through the enemy not as a soldier, not as a champion, but as something older, something primal. My people fought with drills and ranks. He fought with instinct, with fury, with the certainty that he must win or die. And he did not die. I watched entire formations collapse before him. Shields splintered. Spears broke. Men fled rather than face the fire in his eyes. The ground itself seemed to recoil from his steps, as though even stone knew better than to stand against him. From the walls, my soldiers cried out, at first in disbelief, then in wild, desperate hope. The human. The human fights for us. It spread like lightning. Despair cracked, and in its place, courage surged. They poured arrows into the enemy, charged down from the gates, struck with a fury I had not seen since the first day of the siege. All because one man lit a fire that they thought had died. I stood above it all, gripping the stone parapet until my claws bit into it. My heart beat too fast, too strong. Was this what it meant to believe? To see the impossible not as legend, but alive before your eyes? The enemy faltered. What had been a ring of steel around our fortress now bent, fractured, bled away. I could hear their shouts of fear carried on the wind, monster, demon, human. And still he fought. Even when his body bled, even when his breath came ragged, he did not stop. He did not yield. At last, the enemy broke. Their banners dipped, their horns blared retreat, and what had been a siege became a rout. Thousands fled into the night, their shadows swallowed by the dark. Silence fell, broken only by the crackle of fires and the groans of the wounded. My soldiers stood dazed upon the walls, staring at what they had witnessed. The human walked back through the gate. His chest rose and fell with each heavy breath. Blood covered him, his own, theirs, it no longer mattered. His eyes burned still, though softer now, as though the storm had passed. When he stopped before me, the world seemed to still. I searched for words. Gratitude, awe, fear, none were enough. He had saved us. Saved me. But the price, oh, the price was one I had promised in desperation, never expecting to pay. His gaze locked with mine. And then, quietly, he spoke. A promise is a promise, princess. You asked for salvation. I asked for you. My breath caught. My soldiers stood behind me, watching, whispering, waiting. They had seen him save us. They had seen him carve destiny with his bare hands. Could I deny him now? I felt the weight of my crown heavier than ever. Duty warred with fear. Fear warred with something else, something I did not wish to name. He stepped closer, so near I could feel the heat of him, smell the blood and iron on his skin. His voice dropped, low enough only I could hear. You're not just mine because you promised me. You're mine because you know now what humans are. You've seen it. And once you've seen, princess, there's no going back. I shivered, not from cold, but from the truth that curled in his words. For the first time, I realized that the siege had not broken us. The siege had broken me. And in the ruins of my pride, the human had planted something terrifying. A future that belonged not to my people, but to him. The battlefield still smoked as dawn bled across the horizon. Bodies lay scattered like broken idols, their armor twisted, their weapons fallen from limp hands. The cries of the wounded drifted through the air, but quieter now, like the echoes of a storm that had already passed. My soldiers stood in stunned silence. Some leaned upon their blades. Some dropped to their knees. All of them stared at the human. He walked slowly through the gate, each step heavy but unshaken. His bare chest was streaked with crimson. His hands, raw and scarred, still gripped the spear he had stolen. He did not falter. He did not bow. He looked like a god of old tales, carved from fire and defiance, standing in the ruins of victory. And the whispers began. Did you see him? One man broke the siege. No alien could have done it. Only the human. Their voices rose, hushed and reverent. They looked at me, but their eyes slid past me to him. My crown weighed like stone, for I knew what they saw was not their princess, but their savior. I descended the steps, forcing my body to move though my heart thundered. When I stood before him, I searched for words that did not exist. Gratitude. Fear. Reverence. None were enough. He raised his eyes, and though his body bore the marks of battle, his voice was steady. The siege is broken. I swallowed hard. Yes. And so is your promise. The words coiled around me like chains. I had spoken to them in desperation, never believing this moment would come. But now my fortress still stood, my people still breathed, and every soul present had heard my vow. If I refused him now, would my people even follow me? Would they trust me after betraying the one who saved them? He stepped closer, the air around him thick with iron and fire. His voice dropped so only I could hear. You thought you had caught me, princess. But you never held me. You only opened the cage. My breath trembled. He leaned nearer still, his eyes locking with mine, fierce and unrelenting. If I fight for you, princess, you marry me. Those were the terms. A human keeps his oath. Will you? The world seemed to still. I looked at the ruins beyond the gates. At my soldiers, who now knelt not to me, but to the miracle they had witnessed. At the human before me, unbroken, unbound, his presence heavier than armies. And I understood. This was not just a man. This was not just a warrior. This was humanity. A fire that did not die. A will that did not bend. A storm that once unleashed could not be caged again. I bowed my head, not in surrender, but in recognition of truth. Yes, I whispered. I will. His hand reached out, not gentle, but firm, claiming mine as though it had always been his. His grip was warm, steady, and undeniable. Behind us, the sun rose higher, painting the sky in fire. And in that light, I saw the future of my people. It was no longer ours alone. It belonged to the human who had broken our siege, and to the oath I had spoken in desperation. A truth settled cold and sharp in my chest, one that would echo through every court, every council, every throne that still dared to whisper of human weakness. Humans were not prisoners. Humans were not spoils. Humans were reckoning. And I, the last princess of a proud house, had married the storm.